The early morning sunlight filtered through the blinds of Kenny Carter's small room, casting streaks of gold across a messy floor cluttered with sneakers, a few crumpled t-shirts, and half-finished homework assignments. On the bed, Kenny sat cross-legged, a thick book spread open in front of him, its pages filled with intricate illustrations of trees. Black cherry, sugar maple, Douglas fir, he read silently, his fingers tracing the descriptions. Each tree came with its own story, roots that spread deep into the earth, branches that stretched toward the sky, steady and unwavering. He envied them. The faint buzz of the air conditioner filled the silence, broken occasionally by the distant hum of a passing car. Kenny's mom, a nurse at a downtown hospital, had already left hours ago for another double shift. He'd barely seen her lately, except for brief, tired smiles when she came home to sleep for a few hours before starting all over again. He glanced at the clock on his nightstand. 7:15 a.m. The digital numbers glared back at him. 3 weeks. That was all that was left of high school. Just 3 weeks, and he'd be free, or so they said. For Kenny, freedom felt like standing at the edge of a track, waiting for the gunshot that would start the race. The finish line was there, somewhere, but he had no idea what was waiting along the way. The thought made his chest tighten. He closed the book and set it aside, looking out the window instead. Outside, the neighborhood was waking up. The low rumble of a motorcycle came from down the street, probably Mr. Rivera heading to his landscaping job. A kid's laugh echoed faintly, followed by the scolding voice of a parent. This was home, the same sights, the same sounds, the same heat pressing against the walls of their aging apartment complex. Kenny had lived here his entire life, but it felt like a place he was already outgrowing. With a sigh, he pushed himself off the bed and made his way to the kitchen. The fridge was practically empty, just a jug of milk, a half-eaten loaf of bread, and some leftovers he wasn't brave enough to touch. He poured himself a glass of water instead, staring at the peeling wallpaper as he drank. The calendar hanging on the wall caught his eye, each passing day marked off in red. Graduation was circled in bold letters. June 3 RD. Kenny stared at it for a long moment before grabbing his backpack from the couch and slinging it over his shoulder. Another day. He muttered to himself, locking the door behind him as he stepped outside. The sun was already relentless, beating down on the cracked pavement as Kenny made his way down the block. The neighborhood wasn't much to look at, faded graffiti on walls, a stray dog nosing through a trash can, weeds poking through every crack in the sidewalk. But it was his. For better or worse, this place had shaped him. Now it felt like it was holding him back. Kenny. He turned to see Jordan jogging toward him, his ever-present grin wide and confident. J-Dog, as everyone called him, was wearing his usual flashy basketball jersey and carrying a Bluetooth speaker blaring some shaky Graves tune. "Yo, you ready for this?" Jordan asked, falling into step beside him. "For what?" Kenny replied, raising an eyebrow. "For life, man." Jordan spread his arms dramatically. 3 weeks, and we're free. You gotta start thinking about what's next. Kenny smirked. "What's next?" "Breakfast, hopefully." Jordan laughed, slapping him on the back. "You're too chill, bro. This summer's gonna be big, I can feel it." Kenny didn't respond, his gaze drifting to the horizon. The city stretched out before them, glittering towers in the distance contrasting with the weathered houses around them. Big. Yeah, this summer was going to be big. Just not in the way any of them expected. The walk to school felt longer than usual, the sun already baking the asphalt despite the early hour. Kenny and Jordan moved at an easy pace, with Jordan counting a stack of crumpled bills as they went. 200. 300. Jordan muttered, licking his thumb as he flipped through the bills. "Man, I'm up to 1,000. Gonna flip this into 2 by the weekend." Kenny shook his head. "You keep walking around with all that cash loose like that, someone's gonna snatch it. Jordan laughed. Who's gonna take it? This neighborhood knows better. Kenny didn't argue, though he wasn't as sure as Jordan seemed to be. They turned a corner, the school now visible down the street. Before they got too far, a familiar figure emerged from a side alley, walking toward them with a cigarette dangling from his lips. Marcus "Smoke" Wallace. Yo, Smoke. Jordan called out, tucking his cash into his pocket. Looking rough, man. What's good? Marcus glanced at them, the dark bruise under his left eye impossible to miss. His hoodie was pulled low over his head, and his jaw was clenched tight. Say Moel. Marcus said, his voice low as he lit his cigarette with steady hands. He took a deep drag and exhaled, his eyes flicking between Kenny and Jordan before settling straight ahead. No one said anything about the black eye. They never did. Breakfast? Marcus asked, the word less a question and more of a statement. Yeah. Kenny replied. Marcus fell into step with them, his silence a comfort in its own way. By the time they reached the school, the courtyard was alive with chatter, music from someone's speaker, and the occasional whoop of a classmate messing around. The three made their way to the cafeteria, where the air was thick with the smell of syrup and powdered eggs. At a table near the back, Caden, K. Tran and Andre, Dre. Taylor were already waiting. Dre was mid-laugh, likely at one of his own jokes, while Kay sat scrolling through his phone, his glasses perched low on his nose. What's good, fellas? Dre said, giving them a two-finger salute as they approached. Y'all took forever. Blame Kenny. Jordan said, smirking. Dude walks slower than my grandma. Or maybe you just moved too fast. Kenny shot back, sliding into a seat. Kay looked up from his phone, his usual calm demeanor unshaken. Morning. You ready for tomorrow, J-Dog? Jordan grinned. Man, I stay ready. Kay shook his head. Not you, genius. Me. My birthday's tomorrow. Oh yeah. Jordan said, laughing. Kay hitting the big 1-8. Almost forgot. Kay glanced at Kenny. You're next after me, right? June 3 RD. Kenny confirmed. You guys are holding us back. Dre teased, leaning back in his chair. We made a pact, remember? No hitting the strip till we're all 18. Kay's about to unlock the gate, and Kenny's dragging us out to the finish line. Kenny rolled his eyes. Trust me, you're not missing anything. The strip's overrated. Yeah. Marcus said, his voice cutting through the chatter for the first time since they'd sat down. He stubbed out his cigarette in an empty soda can. But it's still ours. The table fell quiet for a moment, the weight of the summer ahead pressing down on them. Turning 18 had always been their unspoken milestone, the line that marked when they'd stop being kids and start being something else. What that something was, none of them knew yet. But as they laughed and traded stories over breakfast, none of them could have guessed how quickly that line would blur, and how dangerous the summer would become. The cafeteria buzzed with energy as the group wrapped up breakfast, trading jokes and loose plans for the day. It was Dre who finally suggested their usual meetup spot. Alright, Boulder and Tro after school. Dre asked, brushing crumbs off his shirt. Same as always. Kenny nodded, slinging his bag over his shoulder. Bet. Jordan said, leaning back in his chair. I got something to show y'all later anyway. You're gonna trip. Kay raised an eyebrow. As long as it's legal. I'm not trying to be an accessory to whatever scheme you've cooked up. Relax, man. It's nothing crazy. Jordan replied with a smirk. The bell rang, cutting their conversation short. Slowly, they peeled away from the table, exchanging quick nods and fist bumps as they went. The hallways were chaotic, with students squeezing past one another to get to class. The group split off one by one, heading to their separate corners of the school. ####. Kenny found his usual seat by the window in biology, pulling out his notebook but hardly paying attention to it. His mind drifted to the meeting spot after school, wondering what Jordan had in store. Whatever it was, it probably wasn't going to be good, but it would be fun. Marcus sat at the back of his math class, hoodie pulled low, doodling absent-mindedly in the margins of his textbook. He wasn't bad at math, actually, he was better than most, but staying focused was another story. The black eye throbbed, a constant reminder of home. Dre, meanwhile, was in history, cracking up the row around him with some story about the time Jordan tripped over his own shoelaces in front of a girl he liked. The teacher gave him a pointed look, but Dre just grinned, earning scattered chuckles from his classmates. And then there was K. In AP Physics, Caden Tran was in his element. His hand shot up to answer questions almost before the teacher had finished asking them. The material wasn't challenging anymore, not really, but K found satisfaction in being the best. It was the one area of his life where everything made sense, where there were rules and logic and solutions. He was the kind of kid who could have been a target for bullies, lanky, glasses perched on the bridge of his nose, always carrying a book or a notebook. But K's quiet confidence and sharp wit kept most people from trying. That, and the fact that he had friends who'd back him up without hesitation. As the morning classes dragged on, a feeling settled over each of them, not boredom, not quite. It was that restless anticipation of something just around the corner. Something big. None of them knew it yet, but the plans they made over breakfast would mark the beginning of a summer that would change everything.